Good morning, collective listeners. At least for me, it's morning here in Boone, North Carolina. Thank you for listening as always. On today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jason Martinez from University of North Texas. I really enjoyed this one. I think Jason is a high-level thinker, and he makes those who are speaking with him high-level thinkers as well. Incredibly humble, one of the forever learners in the field, which I really respect. And I think you guys will really enjoy to hear his perspective and how he views strength and conditioning and how he views the opportunity that we have each day to grow as a coach. So, as always, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have Jason Martinez coming from University of North Texas. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I knew it was going to be good, and I really loved it because when I texted you, I said, "Are you still interested in being a guest?" You said it would be an honor, and I was like, "All right, this is going to be a great episode already." Because I love guys who are excited to talk about what they do, and I can already tell it's going to be the case. So, without further ado, let's get this rolling. Can you kind of give me a background of your background in strength and conditioning? What started off your career, and then your steps along the way, and then what brought you to North Texas now?
Sure. I like to consider myself a bit of a traveler. And, as I go on, briefly touching on piece by piece where I've been and how I got to where I am now, you'll kind of understand why. But originally, my interest and love for training and strength and conditioning, sports specific training, rather, it really started when I was in high school. I had a private sector strength and conditioning coach who I grew very close with and are still really close with to today. And you know, let's call it what it is, man. I am all of 5'7" on a good day, and chose basketball to be my sport of choice. And so there wasn't a whole lot of God given ability that I had to work with. So what I did was, I got linked up with a guy named Aiden Howley, and just started training. And when I started to see the results and the benefit that it played for me on the court, I fell in love with it. And so going into undergrad, it was something that I already had pretty concrete in my mind that it was what I wanted to do as a profession. So all of my coursework as well as my internship hours, they were spent doing strength and conditioning. Now, I'll say this: I wish I started a little bit earlier in my undergrad career in terms of interning. I waited until my senior year to really intern, and I found myself a little bit behind. But it was a humbling experience nonetheless. So after I finished up my undergrad, I shipped off to Clemson, where I spent the summer there, interning around a bunch of great coaches and a ton of interns. And that was really special for me because when I was at Manhattan College, I was the only intern. And you get a lot of special attention and a lot of growth being the only intern, but you never really have great insight onto where you really stand until you're around a bunch of other people who are in the same position. So I spent time there and just understood that, I was starting to get down the X's and O's, or at least what I thought I understood of the X's and O's, right? But I really needed to coach, man. And I had a coach at Clemson who pointed me in the direction of Penn State, said, "Hey, man, big department, a lot of opportunity to get your feet wet with the coaching, the programming side of things. So, I think that's probably your best move from here." So I took his advice. I went out to State College, and then from there I went to Lindenwood, where I did my graduate degree. Lindenwood is probably one of my favorite memories in the strength and conditioning journey that I've had, just because of the special place in which it is. It's a place where about 60% of the entire student population is athletes. So you kind of get like a boarding school feel to it. A ton of different teams. As a GA, you're responsible for about 4 or 5 of your own teams. And I'm talking like I had men's volleyball, women's ice hockey. That's where I started dabbling back into basketball, which was what I wanted to do. So you get a little bit of everything, and it really kind of shapes on how you do things because of the variety of the athlete and the culture. But the great thing about Lindenwood was that it gives you an opportunity to intern for class credit. And so
Right.
I had been around long enough at this time to understand that, and it's no secret that if you want to get into basketball, basketball coaches look for quote unquote basketball guys or girls, right? And so what that means is like you just have to have that basketball only experience. Ended up taking an internship at Wake Forest where I interned with Ryan Horn and AJ Kerr and had a phenomenal transition period to learn what I really didn't know. And that was the one thing that we joke about to this day. Ryan Horn and I are really close still. And he asked me my first day of the job was, what do you think you do really well? And I was like, well, I think I'm a pretty good coach. And he kind of sat back and chuckled and laughed a little bit. And he's like, okay, we're going to find out. And find out we did, right? And so a lot of exposure onto the side of coaching that I didn't know was so integral. Being around somebody who's so high level and understanding that it's not just the information you have, but it's how you deliver that information is really the nuances of coaching. And from there, I went back to finish up my GA at Lindenwood, and I got a phone call in May, and it was Horn. He was like, "Hey man, like AJ's leaving, and so I'd like you to come be my assistant." So I was there, spent about a year and some change there. That staff transitioned out of there, which was a unique period of time because that's right when COVID hit. And so it was one of those deals where we were let go in July. And so, like, nobody else was really let go. We were the only staff. And so during those COVID years, I kind of sat back and just was waiting and, try to remain patient and, by the grace of God, but also just by people being really good people. I ended up being connected to East Carolina. Vinny Coludi, was transitioning out, called me, said, "Hey man, we got a special group of guys here. I think, this is a good position for you if you're interested. I'd like to recommend your name." And that's how I got hooked up at ECU. Um, and as we go through this transition, I don't like spending too much time talking about the background, but I think it's important because at ECU I spent 2 years there, and we also were let go as a staff, right? And so if you look back on that whole timeline, like I'm a young strength coach, been in it for probably 2-3 years at this point, and I've already faced three turnovers in staff. And so, like, as you listen to that, you understand how volatile this is. And when you choose to go into a sport like basketball, like, that's the risk you're putting yourself and your family through, right? It's high risk, high reward. So a new staff came in at ECU. I had the opportunity to stay. However, I took an opportunity to go back home to work for Coach Patino at Iona. Just from a personal standpoint, it was something I felt like I needed to do. There's no secret here in understanding who he is as a coach. And, I really wanted to take that challenge and really test my own skills because, and I don't say it in a negative term. I think, people take it that way, but he's really in tune with what's going on his staff and with his team. So I wouldn't call it micromanaging, but I would call it just it's a daily check-in on your efficacy of what you're doing, and I wanted that. I really wanted to see what I was made of. So that's what I did. I spent a year with him there. I ended up taking this position because I got a phone call from a good friend of mine who was here, who moved on with the staff that moved on here, and it really talked to my heart because the phone call it was simple as this, man. It was, hey, I'm taking another opportunity with this coaching staff that's moving to Texas Tech, but I have a guy here that I'm really having a hard time leaving. And, I feel like it is my responsibility to not just find somebody, but find the right person because I really want him to be successful. And as a strength coach, talking about a head coach like that, you are comfortable knowing that that's somebody you want to go to war with. And that's not talking bad about anybody previously that I worked with, but just as you go through your journey, you really start to find out more about the right fit, and I think that's what it came down to. So that's how I ended up here. Now I'm at North Texas, and I'm extremely happy with the decision. Ironically enough, my fiance, who is a dietitian, we were doing long distance, and she works in the college realm as well. So she was at the University of Arkansas, and I jumped on this opportunity here, and the conversation was like, well, like we go from a 3 hour plane ride to a 4 hour car drive, like that's good, right? And so we were excited about that. About 2 months into this job, our dietitian for men's basketball left, and they had asked me if she was interested in coming to working with us here. So it's funny how things happen, man. I'm a believer, and so I think we're all part of a bigger plan. But ultimately, if you stay the course, things just kind of work out. And so now I get to team up every day with my fiance, tackling this crazy realm of athletic performance.
We have it's insane the amount of parallels in your story, and I mean, selfishly, I'm going to say to mine because quite literally, my fiance is the dietitian here at App State,
All
and
right.
so she worked. Yeah, but I was at Texas Tech prior to this with women's basketball, so I'm familiar with Andrew who came over from UNT. I never ended up meeting him because I had left before, but same deal. I left, and then my fiance came on 2 months after I ended up getting the job here at App State. And then another one it's a little hard. It hurts me a little bit, but last year at Wake Forest, they beat us on a 17-footer. I mean, it was like I think it was 1.2 on the clock or something like that. So I mean, that one stung a little bit to bring that
Right.
up, but so
But man, and we can. I love that, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well. When you get in, your moral compass is a little skewed because it gets it gets overlapped by your professional goals.
mm,
And so, like, for me personally, being a competitor, being a hard worker, being someone who loves the game of basketball and dedicated to my own personal craft, it was how do I get to be the best coach I can be at the highest level I can be, right? And that sort of drives your trajectory. Hey, I want to go Power Five. Hey, I want to be, uh, you know, with basketball only, or whatever the case may be. And the longer you're in it, the less it becomes about the professional goals, and the more you start to realize that if you take care of your personal goals, how well the professional goals show themselves. And I think that's the biggest lesson as you go through as a young coach, you start to find out is that if you take care of you, it will take care of you back. And that we are not coaches as an identity, but we are coaches as a professional, and it's a way we make a living. Now we're passionate about it, right? And it's something that we have as a bigger purpose in life is mentoring and having a service attitude. I don't even know. Servitude could be a new word if it's not already, right? But ultimately, right? Like it'll show itself. And so young coaches might call, and that, I love talking to them about it because they'll ask like, hey, like, what do you think I should be doing? It's like, well, man, what does your heart tell you, right? Because ultimately, if you listen to your heart and understand, have a true sense of self and who you are, the right job opportunity will present itself, and you won't have to ask. You'll just jump on it because you know it's the right fit for you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what, like literally when I heard about App State, you know how it goes. You hear about a bunch of different, positions, and it's like, well, I don't really know. And for some reason, as soon as I heard App State, I was like, all right, that's exactly where I want to go. I knew it right from the start, and I agree with you. I always think there is a bigger plan, and so that speaks into that piece as well too. And I agree with you. Taking care of your personal life, and that's what one thing I love talking about in the podcast is one of the biggest things, right? Like I think. This is the year we finally figured out how to approach 20 hours. Like
Yep.
we've been together for 4 years now. It's always been tough. But we did on Sunday, I have my double off day for men's and women's. We did every single fall activity there is to do. Made sure we spent that personal time together. And then, I agree. It's if you can take care of that personal life, all of a sudden your week and your month and it stacks on years are better and better overall for your career too.
Yeah.
But we're fortunate on that piece too, though, because I can always just pop over and see her and say, "Hey, I'll check in on a couple guys," and then I'll say, "All right, do you want to get some lunch together?" That's a really nice piece
Right.
to it for sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing you did bring up in the beginning that I'm really interested to kind of speak about is going from Manhattan College, where you're the only intern, to now Clemson, where you did have to compare yourself to other interns and see where you were at. what were kind of the main things that you noticed about yourself, and then how did you approach that process to improve upon what you were looking to improve upon?
The biggest thing was I started realizing holes in my knowledge, and it started out. I went to Clemson because I understood what their infrastructure was like, and I understood the emphasis on which they place on sports science. And coming from Manhattan College, we just didn't have any. And obviously, as this profession continues to progress, we utilize certain things like sports science tools to help objectify things. And so I understood the importance of that. Now I didn't know how far advanced it was and how far behind I was. Um, and so that was a learning curve for me, but also utilizing some of those objective measures to kind of solidify programming, I think was another big thing too, right? Like, we all read the NSCA book and whatever the case may be about how 3 by 10 and 4 by 6 and certain ways of doing things, and it remains black and white like that from the textbook. But realizing things in real time, it was a struggle for me at first because a lot of the stuff that I was witnessing deviated from the textbook information, right? And when you're a young coach and everything is new, you kind of scramble because it's almost like it kind of puts a crack in your foundation. And so relearning things and learning how to be okay being wrong was a big piece of that development piece, right? But let's also call it what it is, all right? Like you're going from, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful manner, but you're going from a lower major D1 to the top 1 percenters when you're talking about athleticism, and learning how, what are you going to do when your coaching cues change, because they're really adaptive to things. And so now it's like you have to mold and you have to learn how to kind of adjust on the fly to get training adaptation, right? But you have to be around those high level coaches and higher level athletes to understand that there's a continuum and there's not a one size fits all. But I was super fortunate, and honestly, if we're being completely transparent with one another, the best thing I learned was how to be a good staff member, and how important it is to take care of people first. Because, dude, I'm a New York guy. I didn't have a car, right? I was pretty adept to getting around on foot by will. When you go to Clemson, South Carolina, that's no longer the case. So I took an airplane, man. I walked across the stage of graduation, hopped on an airplane with a bag, and showed up, right? And that comes with a lot of challenges. I had no furniture, no what means of transportation, but I had interns and staff members who really took me in and helped me navigate through those things. And it really showed me the importance that even though it is a competitive field, there is no going through it alone. And it's also important to give because eventually it comes back full circle.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree 1,000%. And those are two fantastic points that you bring up. I mean, one thing that interests me, and that I'm seeing a common theme with you, is you actively look for things in areas of improvement, and seeing where, okay, how can this challenge me? How can this improve me? And I'm curious about this. Like, how do you stay vulnerable through those moments, though, right? And how do you? I mean, I guess like it's tough, I mean, because for me, when I actively choose something I know I need to improve upon, or if I actively go into a program like you're saying, where somebody's going to challenge you each day. I mean, sometimes I take things personal. I can break down a little bit. How do you stay vulnerable in those moments?
I think you could take it personal, right? And I think the competitor in us does take it personal because we don't like feeling incompetent. But just because you take it that way doesn't mean your actions have to dictate that or express it nonetheless. And I think that's the biggest part, right? Is how do I take this to heart without wearing it on my sleeve and continuously using it as something to develop yourself? Because at the end of the day, right, like, you do it because you don't want to feel like an imposter, but you're ultimately doing to better the people that you're serving. And that's the biggest thing. Almost to a fault sometimes, I don't like letting people down. I like being the person that somebody needs me to be when they need me to be it. And so And I think that's where it really puts things into perspective and keeps things in hindsight is like I have to continuously cut myself open and understand where my holes in my knowledge base are in order to better serve, because ultimately that's why we do it, right? And I think as long as you're keeping the lens on somebody else, it helps take the oh, it's about me away, right? Like, hey, I'm not doing a great job here, but it's not because I'm not good enough. It's just because this situation dictates differently, right? And then ultimately, you just look back and you have this plethora of experience to lean back on, and it becomes less about what I know and more about how can I apply what I thought I knew.
Exactly, and for me, it's like that living in fear piece too is the opposite side to it, right? Is you never want to challenge yourself, you don't want to improve things because it is that avoiding that uncomfortability, like you said, like of feeling that feeling of incompetency for just a little bit. But then at the end, you do have that background of experience after you go through that. So do you want to live on this side that is constantly kind of avoiding that incompetency and then always kind of question yourself, almost an imposter syndrome like situation, or do you want to be uncomfortable for just a little bit of time and then all of a sudden this is something that doesn't really bother you anymore? Like my biggest thing when I first started was conditioning. I
Hmm.
was football through and through, like the 40-40s type deal, like I didn't really understand how in shape you had to be to play basketball. And then my first 2 years, it was, I think my first year, I really kind of was just like, well, I wasn't as curious. I didn't try to find different ways to improve. And I kind of just thought it was a good idea to just be steadfast in what I believed at the time. And then every day was always the stress of like, are we in shape? I mean, it's like February, and I'm asking myself these questions. It was because I didn't tackle that head on. So then this over the summer, it was okay. Let me call every single coach available. Let me find out what other people do for conditioning. How can we improve these things that I'm looking for? And all of a sudden, next February, I'm not really worried about the team being in shape, right? Because I did go through that moment of uncomfortability. So, what's your newest thing that you're challenging yourself with now?
Well, I'd like to touch upon something you said and kind of bring it full
For
circle
sure.
from our previous conversation, right? And it really does bring it full circle. So it's ultimately being around people that are supportive, and it's also being around people who support what you do best, right? And I think those are some of the biggest lessons I've learned in terms of finding the right fit, right? I did another podcast, and you know the person doing the podcast had asked me, like, what would be some criteria you would say that makes a good strength coach versus a bad strength coach. And I didn't really enjoy the question because I don't necessarily believe that there is a fine line, but what it comes down to is fit, man. Like, I think you could be a great strength coach by the every term of the imagination that we'll use, right? Like, hey, knows programming, can coach his butt off or her butt off, right? But you take that person who has experience and knowledge and you put them in a position that's around a coaching staff that they don't see eye to eye on certain things, like they're not a good strength coach in that particular situation, right? And vice versa. Like, you could take an inexperienced strength coach, right, and put them in a position that there's around a culture, an environment, and an ideology that they believe in and that they thrive in, and they could be the best strength coach in the country. And it's all about fit, but it's also about support, right? Like, being around coaches who support the idea of creativity and understanding that things aren't always going to be perfect and that progress takes time. That's how you develop, but it all comes down to fit, man. It all comes down to fit. And I think the more you start learning about yourself, like we talked about before, man, the more the right fit will expose itself to you.
I mean, and that's so key because I do feel like a lot of people try to make that fit when sometimes it's just not meant to be. And I
Right.
don't think it's the fault of the coach, the players, the strength coach himself or
Yeah.
herself. Like sometimes it just doesn't work out. And,
Correct.
and that's okay. Because again, like I've been to a decent amount of schools as well, and every time I go in, I hate talking about the last strength coach because the staff may be different, the situation may be different, and exactly what you said, the fit may not have been what they're looking for. Like, I've been in a position before where a strength coach is like legendary, like, and we everybody would know the name, and some people didn't really like him, but it was
Mhm.
because of his fit in that specific situation. Now at a different school, doing a fantastic job again. And so again, I would be more of the inexperienced coach, as you say, coming in and filling that position. But because of the fit and because of what those coaches are looking for and what the players are looking for, it ended up looking better. So that is kind of one of my pet peeves of the strength and conditioning realm too, is always kind of looking at other positions and saying, how successful is this person? What are they doing? And again, it's different levels of support that people are getting. So I think that's really key. And I'm glad you brought that point up too, because fit sometimes doesn't work. So it doesn't mean you have to force it too as a strength coach. If you're in that position where you don't feel like you fit in, like, sometimes it's not going to work out. You don't have to spend every day trying to go crazy figuring out how to make it fit. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible. I mean, and so I am curious now still too, though. What are you doing to challenge yourself? What are you doing to better yourself? What's your main focus now?
So the biggest challenge I'll say coming into this job and where I continue to try to be better is, I took this job and it was different than any other job coming in that I've had before, experience wise, because this is not a program that's going through turnover for the worst, right? Like this is a successful basketball program. And the head coach who took over the job was the associate head coach here. So there's a lot of familiarity to winning, right? So, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well as probably a lot of people that are listening, right? A lot of the times you come into a job, either you're the strength coach coming into a job because someone left for whatever the case may be, or you're coming in as a brand new staff because the program wasn't as successful in the past. Now, when you come into a position like I did, where you're coming into a position where the strength coach that was here prior to me was fantastic, and trained the heck out of these guys. And we have movement literacy, we have an understanding of training, and then on the basketball side, you have a culture that is understanding what it takes to win, and they have a way of doing so. You are no longer trying to implement your ways in that program. You're trying to find a way to bleed what you believe in with the culture that's already set in place. And that was difficult at first for me, because there's certain characteristics that we thrive upon here that weren't as highly emphasized in my last position. For example, um, the warm up at basketball practice. I come from a place last year where it was, hey man, 5 minutes, get them going. We got to get to practice. Here it's a little different. Coaches, he's very supportive of like, hey man, like whatever you feel like you need from a training standpoint, I'm gonna give it to you. Communicate it on the front end, whether that's you want to get some accelerations in, whether you want to do some plyometrics, whether you want these guys to compete a little bit, whatever, I'm down for it, right? And they thrive off of competition and creativity here, right? So like coming into it, like your normal 5 minute dynamic warm up, it doesn't fit what practice looks like. So I have to change the way I do things, in order to serve the greater purpose, right? And so that was a process for me, because that used to be that way, right? Like as you're a young strength coach, like, and you have certain teams that have that kind of culture, like whether it's a women's soccer team, whether it's a baseball team, and that's kind of the culture that they have. It's like, hey, like let's do these little competitions, let's do these little drills, agility drills, but let's make them reactive to have a little bit of fun. Oh no, the F word, right? Like fun. Like, yes, it's okay to have fun, right? And it doesn't have to be all serious and business. Sorry, I'm gonna keep swiping back here because there's this little light that goes on and off. There it goes. But that was a challenge for me, to change my mindset in order to serve that need, because that's what we do, right? We are a service role, we are support staff. Like, how can we match what we do really well with what we're being asked of? And so, this little things like that, man, trying to go back in the day and be a newbie with it, if you will. Like, okay, let's go to the court, let's throw some cones out and let's try these reactive drills. Like, how does this look? Like, what does this flow like? Are the guys going to respond well to this in practice? Like, let's race today. Like, let's do certain things like that. It sounds silly, but it can be challenging because if you go away from it for too long, like you do lose a little bit of that creativity that you had at one point. So that was a challenge for me, man. And what ended up happening is I found so much more joy in the job by placing a higher emphasis on serving that role.
And so I'm just curious about this. Like, what were those resources, and what did you use to become creative again, in your words? Because it's so easy to, like you said, focus on more of like the X's and O's of strength and conditioning. I'm so concerned about movement patterns within the lift that I'm not really thinking about enjoying the process. How did you kind of check yourself, and what resources did you use?
I think the biggest thing was the fact that we spend so much darn time at practice, dude. like we are at practice all the time. And let's call it what it is. Like after that warm-up segment, like you kind of sit in the background. And me personally, I like getting with the guys, hyping them up a little bit, put my hands on guys, checking in, doing little things like that. But using that time to dissect what's really going on, right? So for example, watching the way that we defensively rotate from a schematic standpoint, what's being asked, right? And then just dissecting that all the way down to its primal instinct or primal movement, right? So, like, there's a drill we like to do at practice for a warm up. It's like I'll have a guy at the top of the key, I'll have a guy down at the block, almost like he's going to rotate to a closeout, and I'll blow the whistle and they'll race to the corner, right? It's a closed drill based on an open real life situation, and then to compete with it. Like, hey man, like I'll blow the whistle. Guy at the top of the key is going to try to beat the guy at the block to the corner. Loser has 5 push-ups. Something simple like that, right? Um, we preach coming to a 2 foot stop here, right? So like integrating like gather steps and gallops into the warm up. Like, all right, we're gonna do a skip onto a jump stop onto a vertical jump. You know what I mean? Just little stuff like that. Even like just the way and the time we practice, right? Like we have a group that goes in the morning, we have a group that goes after practice. But it at practice is a great time to maybe throw something in like the mini band warm up, where we're doing some hip stuff with the mini band because it's different and it serves a purpose. So now we don't have to take time on the front end or the back end to do it. We can do it in practice, right? And those are certain ways that you can start introducing them to stuff. And then what I've found is that it's okay to ask them, hey man, like what do you want to do for the warm up today? Oh, coach, I really like that drill where, we were in between two cones and we were trying to lose the guy. All right, cool. That's what we'll do today. You know what I mean? And creating a little bit of autonomy of it. And you'll find out what they gravitate towards and what they don't. And then you just kind of go from there.
And have you seen that kind of creativity that you're speaking to bleed over into the lifts as well?
Yeah, because I think, and I was talking to a good friend of mine and he opened up my mind to this. And I don't know if it was his original thought or he heard it from somewhere, whatever the case may be. But we were talking programming a little bit, and I was telling him like, hey man, like I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards autonomy on certain lifts, because I've also had the ability to have objective measures here, like force plates, which keep me honest, right? So, like, for example, if we're going to do a squat pattern and we have guys that are working on propulsion, like, I might give them the autonomy to pick whether they want to do a front squat, a back squat, a split squat, you know what I mean? Whatever the case may be, and let them run with it and then continue to assess whether we are reaching desired training goals. But going back to my point, my buddy told me, he was like, "Hey man, like and he works in professional sports, and he's like, I found that that's the best way to do it, because it creates ownership of the training process for them, And he's like, the body is a smart organism, but it's also dumb enough to not know the difference between a headache and a brain tumor, right? So it's not going to understand the difference between a front squat and a back squat. It's not going to know that, you know, this position here is going to translate here. Like it either does or it doesn't, but you're going to get the best training effect by finding the thing that they're most competent in and comfortable with. And so I've opened myself up to allowing a little bit more creativity and autonomy with certain stuff like choosing the main movement pattern, but also some of the mobility stuff. Like, hey man, try this. How does this feel? Oh, I don't really feel anything here, coach. All right, well, adjust. Try this. Here's where I want you to feel it. Like, find it here, and then they'll come up with something, and they'll self organize, and they'll land on something that maybe I wouldn't have chose for the day, but it's working for them.
Mm. We've spoken on autonomy endlessly on this podcast, actually, in the past with other guests, and I think it's to me, it's actually a crucial piece. And I was actually with just on the most recent episode with Alex Cost. He's the strength coach for the G League 76ers team, and he spoke a lot about autonomy and how he's seen success with this program. And one thing I forgot to mention on that too is Allie Kirshner. For those who are familiar with her, she was the strength coach for Stanford when they won the national championship for women's basketball. And she spoke of the challenges over COVID was, I mean, they didn't really get a lot of training in, obviously. But then on top of that, too, Stanford's a really high academic school. So they really cared about school. And so a big issue was it was school, basketball, and lifting, which is how it should be in all programs, in my opinion, but it's not always the case, right?
Right.
And so she talked about how she ended up with both of those problems, deciding on, okay, exactly what you just spoke about. Here's 5 squats. Okay, you get to pick which one you want to do. Here's 5 presses. You get to pick, and so on and so forth. And so by the time they got to the end of the season, she really let them pick a lot of what they wanted to do. And now I'm not saying that's the reason they won the national championship. There's a lot of other factors that go into it, but it is part of a highly successful program, in my opinion, is implementing that autonomy. I haven't really necessarily heard it from that mobility standpoint. Do you give them more like freedom of movement, or how do you approach that with the mobility specifically?
Yeah, I think it comes from like, okay, having a rough plan of what we want to do that day. I like breaking it up into like just different joints on different days because we will hit a hip or ankle every day, but just different, articulations of that joint movement. But I think, ultimately what you find is like, hey man, like I want you to be able to do this, right? Whether that's get into external rotation or whether that's getting into internal rotation. And it's different for everybody, right? And I think the tolerance is the biggest piece um, when it comes to mobility because I'm a firm believer that there has to be a large strain in that specific joint angle and joint movement for there to be a change in mobility or flexibility, right? And so you'll find that like certain guys, they don't like getting into internal rotation or external rotation in certain positions. Like for example, like some guys just hate a bench pigeon stretch. They just don't like it. You know what I mean? Like and the way in the way to drive force into that position with that bench pigeon, like they're just not comfortable with it. But the same guy, I stand up and put his knee on the wall in a tall position and ask him to force his leg into that external rotation, like he's more willing and apt to get it there. And so it's like you're getting the same response. It's just two different methods of doing it, right? But it's also so subjective to the individual. You know what I mean? Like they like basketball players tend to gravitate towards stuff that they're used to doing, right? So like whether it's in the training room, whether it was what they did in high school, whether it's what they did with their own personal trainer or personal strength coach at home, like they'll gravitate towards stuff that they're used to doing and that they feel gives them an advantage. And so I like using that as well. Like, guys who come off an injury and they were doing PT and it's like, whether they're dealing with, a little bit of lower back tightness and they're like, hey, well, when I was with so and so in PT, like I felt like this really helped me. Okay, cool, do that. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is just finding what they feel works best because ultimately, going back to our original point, that's what drives the biggest change.
Absolutely, and where I use it the most is not necessarily mobility itself, but within our recovery sessions.
Perfect. Yep.
Because I mean, like if you really look at the effects of each, they're pretty similar. There's some that stand out slightly more from a recovery standpoint, but to me, it's hard to measure recovery, right? Because it is so subjective. So I really kind of let them know, and I even tell our recruits this too. Like when you come in here, if you hate like static stretching, we're not doing static stretching with you. If you love the Theragun, which every athlete does, then you go on the Theragun, go crazy on it. I mean, and what I have noticed with that is more people coming in for extra recovery work outside of the organized recovery that we have. And again, because like you said, there's a certain level of ownership now to this. It's okay. I get to do what I want to do in this situation, so I'm more willing and more open to come back and come in on my own time to make sure we get that recovery in. And to me, it's the psychological effect too. If you think something's stupid, it doesn't matter how much really of a positive gain you can get from it, a positive effect, you're still going to ultimately frame it in a negative way. And so you're not going to see the benefits as much as you would as if you had believed in something. So I think that's a big piece of that process as well. My final question for you, and what I'm curious about is, uh, you came in a little bit later in the off season, correct? Then you didn't get a full off season with UNT. Is that correct? Or
I This time I got a full one. At
okay, okay.
ECU, at ECU I came in November. I was there like
Okay, yeah.
the first or second day of practice before a game, like our
Wow.
first game.
That's
Yeah.
just nuts. Those ones always kind of blow my mind too. And I mean, it cracks me up because you're at the end of the bench and you don't even know who's scoring right
You know
now.
what I
So
mean? Yeah, 100%. You're like, all right, five.
here we go. Here
Yeah,
we
right.
go. And so, well, I guess my question now is this upcoming off season. What are your main points of focus? What are you looking to implement with the team the most this upcoming off season?
So going in or what I focus on coming in?
I would say going into this next off season. What are you looking at?
I want to continue to use certain things like the force plates to fine tune what the guys are doing in the off season. This is the first year I've started dabbling with it. And before, I kind of programmed the more traditional way when it comes to off season, like, whether that's tempos and hypertrophy for upper body. I think I want to spend a little bit more time fine tuning their force profiles and then continuously um, staying that path as we get closer and closer to in season. And then also just paying close attention to certain things like body composition and gains and lean muscle mass and its effect on that individual's ability to produce force. Basketball is one of those sports where a lot of the coaches, and it's no knock on them, I think it's okay a lot of the times, but sometimes it doesn't fit. Where they'll sit down, they'll be like, yeah, I think so and so needs to put on 10 pounds of muscle, or I think so and so is a little too heavy, and that's why he's moving a little slow laterally. And I think using some of those subjective opinions and kind of leaning more on the objective side of things to kind of validate those, or maybe it's a good driving point to say, hey coach, like, I think we might want to keep an eye on this. I hear you, but let's try this out first, because we are reaching the desired outcome without changing lean muscle mass. I think what I found is that you spend a lot of time trying to put muscle mass on guys or taking it off, taking some pounds off on guys during the off season. It's no longer where we get 8 hours. It's 4 and 4, and basketball still is a really high priority during the off season. And it's no secret that when you're trying to change body composition one way or the other, it is very strenuous on the system. And so if we don't have to, I don't believe that we should. But those are certain things that I want to continue to dive into this off season, and I want to take this time now, as we talk upon that, to just show some love and appreciation for my fellow strength and conditioning coaches that are always picking up the phone for me when I have an idea. who are always a wealth of experience and knowledge, and then always have such a large willingness to give. I think, that's the one thing that as we continue to grow, that I've realized how important these people are in my own personal development, because I have such a great network of people who are willing to pick up the phone and talk through things. And as you're within this basketball realm, you realize that you do spend a lot of time alone, and you become slave to your own ideas and your own reality. And talking through it with competent minds is how you create different ideas and creativity and how to do things, man. And I have such a great network of coaches around me that are just so pivotal and such a large important part of my continuous growth. So that's something that I don't want to go overlooked or be not being said, especially when I talk on podcasts, because I think a lot of what I say is my own practice, but they're not always my own ideas. And I want to make sure that I pay homage to those people that invested in me, because I am who I am as a coach, largely in part to because of who they are as people and as coaches. So I think that was a great segue for me to bring that in.
Absolutely. I mean, with the basketball specifically too, like your weight room is always separate, and typically, I mean, unless it is somewhere like Wake Forest, Texas Tech, where they do have the ability to have an assistant strength coach almost all the time, it's just you there, and so you
Hmm.
can bounce these ideas off yourself. And like you said, you can become a slave to your own ideas. It can be a lack of challenge to your creativity as well, and it's easy to get set in your ways within that. So that's where that network becomes absolutely crucial. So I think that's a fantastic point to bring up to finish this. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man, no problem at all. And hey,
Yeah.
listen, like for us too, like don't be a guy who's always calling, but he's never picking up. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
give and take, man. Give and
Oh,
take,
yeah.
because your opinion matters, right? And you never know what you say that might resonate with somebody, and continuously progress what we're doing as a whole, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. Like we got to continuously be advocates for one another, because if you win, I win, and we all
Mhm.
win, right? So don't be a guy who's always calm but is not picking up.
Oh, yeah, and that's an extremely important point, and exactly what you said earlier too, you get what you give, so I am a big believer in karma as well, so you don't wanna be that guy.
All right, yeah,
So
exactly.
well, Jason, thank you so much. I mean, it was a really great conversation to start my day. It's early in the morning that we're recording this, and I appreciate it because it's going to challenge me to be better today as well too. Uh, Final piece, where can people reach you at? Is there any social medias that you'd like them to follow you on, or if anybody had any questions about anything you spoke about, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Twitter. My phone is always open. That's usually the method I utilize. Somebody, you know, hits me up on Instagram or Twitter. I usually give out my phone number, and I like talking on the phone. I think it's just a more personal way to go about things. But you can email me. I guess sometimes it's hard for me to shift through work emails, because you got a 6'8" shooting guard from so and so who's sending you his tape, and it's like, dude, I'm not the recruit. I'm not in recruiting, but sometimes some emails get lost in there. So probably the social media way is best, but you know, whatever you feel comfortable. Like eventually, I will get back to you. If you're an email guy, I'll get back to you.
The great recruiting emails
You know what I mean? It's like,
all the time. Yeah,
six
yeah.
eight out of Turkey. I really think I could play for you guys. You're like, I
Yeah, I'm
don't
like,
doubt it, my friend, but it's not my job. You know what I
I
mean?
have zero control over this
Right,
situation.
right, right, right.
And I'm also not hanging my hat on my first ever recruit coming from an email. So,
Yeah, right.
awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, man. It was a pleasure and an honor.